Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Hastings County Sasquatch. This is Chris Sandero with a new guest for us tonight. It's Randy Harrington, and we'll let Randy come on in and introduce himself a little bit more. We got a lot to talk about. Randy's down in the Missouri area, and he's got some stories for us and a few things that we're gonna throw back and forth between each other and see if we can learn a little bit from each other here.
Well, I actually live outside of Kansas City. That's where my residence is.
Oh,
gotcha.
On the Kansas side, but still, when people think of Kansas City, they think of Kansas City Chiefs, Kansas City, Missouri. But yeah, I mean, I'm one state above Oklahoma and one state to the west of Missouri, which is my two primary states that I go into for the Bigfoot research.
Randy, tell us the name of your organization that you're working with.
Well, my partner, Shane Carpenter, who lives in Springfield, so he invited me back in 2017 to a private property location down in southern Missouri that has been extremely fruitful. And so we've had this partnership since then, and we've become good friends, because you can't spend that much time with somebody and not get to know who they are. And he's way up here when it comes to, what I think is the qualities that you need to have if you're going to come across as believable, in this arena. So he has a group called Ozark Mountain Sasquatch, Ozark Mountain Sasquatch. And he's on YouTube. Not very active. He's not very active, but he used to put out a lot of videos where he would just be out on the property, just checking things out. And he's got a lot of good stuff, but just not a whole lot of content. Me, on the other hand, I've got a YouTube channel called The Sensible Bigfoot Project. And I didn't start mine until after he and I got going for several years. And I saw all the stuff that we were uncovering out there. And so I'm found a way to present those in a very logical way, I hope. People watch how we lay out the evidence and the things that happen. So his channel is called Ozark Mountain Sasquatch, and he's working on a website because we're also working with a couple of biologists, specifically with the footprints that Shane has captured over the years. He's been able to document growth patterns, which not many people have that opportunity when you're involved with a family unit of these things that seem to keep gravitating back into this same location. And we're blessed with having some mud flats on this property, and we keep finding the same tracks over and over to the juveniles, and year over year showing how they're growing and morphing into the adult type track. And when they're young, they're very human-like. They almost look like a human track, but then as they get about 12 inches, they start to spread out like a much heavier animal would need for a foot, type. So it's because of that we have a biologist named John Moore in Texas who's gotten involved, and it's just been a fascinating journey up to this point because we've been so lucky to have so much activity and catching them on thermal video. And as Chris and I mentioned earlier, there was a time Shane walked up 7 foot away from a juvenile that was trying to hide in deep grass. It's just been spectacular. If you need to fill your bucket with research, and we all do, when we have some type of sighting, we kind of get ate up with it. And so we're all that way. We're curious beings ourselves. And when we have something happen, we can get all crazy and ate up with it. And I think that's the arena is filled up with people who've had encounters and then consumed by the subject. I'm no different. I'm sure you guys are the same. So this property that Shane invited me to has filled my bucket and allowed me to get a comfort level. We've had so many things happen and learned so much that really blessed to have had this happen.
Well, that's great. I don't know anybody else that has the opportunity to measure the growth of a juvenile as they grow older through the mud flats that you have. I've never even heard of that before. That's great.
Well, he also has 2 handprints that goes with the size of specific footprints. which I thought was fantastic.
Wow.
He's got a handprint that went with some, I think, 10.5-inch tracks. Over time, if the tracks keep showing up and over again, you'll occasionally catch one that puts its hand down. So he got a hand track that went with some 10.5-inch tracks. And recently, this past year, and it's on one of my videos, where it's the one where I talk about the holes being dug with sticks.
Mm-hmm.
Shane found some new 6-inch tracks in this family unit. So some of the siblings had grown up, and we didn't find their tracks anymore. And now, subsequently, we've got some younger ones that are rising up in the family unit that now have 6-inch tracks. So these holes were being found by Shane when he'd go on a hike, and you'd find these holes all over the place. And we tried to determine for the longest time what they could mean. But what it looked like, if you watch the video, I think I explained it really well for what we think is happening. But come to find out, it's probably true what we thought was happening. It's the little one it's a time killer. He's digging holes with a stick as a time killer while mom or dad is doing something, because he always leaves the stick in the hole halfway being dug, like he has to leave immediately. So what is happening for that to be the same pattern at almost every hole being dug? It's probably just killing time while he's told to sit there and play with himself while mom is doing something, say like eating pawpaws off a tree or something. But when she's ready to go, his job is to immediately follow her. So the stick is always dropped and left right where it's at with dirt still on the stick. But fortunately, on one of the last holes that Shane found, there was a handprint left in the dirt that was dug out of the hole, and he casted it, and it's about half the size of his, and it goes with the 6-inch tracks.
That's great. Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. Just like even the behavior to just to sit there and dig holes, like what I guess it's just a time killer. Yeah. What would they be doing that for?
Well, from what it appears, and it seems to be repeating itself. We need to have things repeat itself for it to start to say, okay, there's a pattern. And we found the holes in various locations. And the first time Shane found the 6-inch tracks, followed them back into some scrub, and found a hole with the stick still in it where he was following these little 6-inch tracks. I went right up to a hole. So that it starts to validate it's the little one that's digging the hole. And then after that is when he eventually found a hole where a hand was put down, and it was a small hand. So now it's almost written out there for us to read, the signs that it's the little one doing it. There's only certain periods of time in this family unit when Shane would find tracks between, say, like 5 and 7 inches, that he was finding holes. And then when those young ones, the tracks got up around 8 or 9 inches, he wouldn't find any holes anymore. Now it's happening again with these new 6. So it's almost like there's a specific age where part of their discipline training with mom and dad, certainly they've got to do what they're told, and keeping them where they can see them. If mom is doing something like checking the pawpaws for being ripe on the trees, and the little one has to entertain himself for a few minutes, it seems like he's grabbing a stick and digging a hole is what he's just, it sounds like a discipline. They certainly are being trained to be disciplined, and I like it. I love the mystery of seeing something like that and then having to formulate a hypothesis on it, and then the theory, and have it all start to show that's what it's doing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that being said, using tools and everything, have you come across like nut crushing stones of some sort, where they're crushing nuts to crack open or anything like that?
Now, some of the things I'm going to tell you is from Shane's information. I've seen some of it when I've been out there with him, but he's been out there. He goes out there all the time, so he has a lot of information, and I've watched some of his videos. Haven't found anything like a nut crushing station, but we have found interesting things, and you're going to find this interesting. Rocks. We had a really loud tree knock happen at the corner of our base field area, which I would say it's probably 20 to 30 acres. with a lot of scrub and trees, surrounded with 2 ridges and a creek running alongside at the base of one of the ridges. That's where our base camp area was for the longest time. And we heard a really loud wood knock, and I had my generator running because I have a little Honda generator that I run when I make coffee and download stuff into my laptop. So I do all that at the camp. But we heard a loud tree knock at the corner of the field. So, and we thought that was interesting, but we kind of knew the area where we heard it. Well, when I was telling you about the 6-inch tracks that Shane was following back into that corner in those scrub, when he found the hole, there was a log laying in the brush, parallel to the ground, and it had a rock sitting on top of the log. And and it was about baseball sized. So Shane hit the log with it, and we looked at each other because we were like, that's the knock we heard 2 nights ago. So there's the rock sitting on the log, and we actually did recordings and tried to see if we couldn't put them on a spectrogram and compare, the sounds and that kind of stuff. But here's the interesting part when it comes to tools. How many times when you go out, you hear a tree knock, say like on a ridge, and then you hear a responding tree knock? What if one of the conversations that people have is they must be doing it with their mouth, or they must be doing it with their fist, because when I do a tree knock and one responds immediately, it seems like they don't have that much time to go find a stick or a rock or whatever they do. So most people are coming up with ideas of how else could it be happening. Now, maybe it is mouth pops, maybe it is chest hits, I don't know. But what I do know is Shane has found multiple places on this property where about 3 or 4 foot up in a tree is a rock in the fork of a tree, almost like they have pre-set up phone booths.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, we found in one particular property a pile of rocks near a railway track, and now the I guess it was like a stone cache, I guess, if you will, or 3 to 4 to 5 stones all piled up together. It must have been like about 75 yards away from the railway track. So it's the ballast rocks that they took from the train tracks and they stored it in the woods over here at a particular spot. So
interesting.
We should mark those ones like you did.
Right. I'm getting ready to put out a video on that with all of the details. You're gonna like it. But when you're talking about the rock, where it took some rocks and possibly stored them as maybe for throwing or something to that effect, who knows? Who really knows? But I did have something happen back in 2009 where we lost 2 items in the Kiamichi Mountains, completely lost track of them because how do you know where you lose a walkie-talkie in a mountain system? Someone was missing a walkie-talkie. They'd had it in their pocket before we started a 7-mile trip, ATVs through creeks and hills and trails to get to a camping site. When we get there, he was like, damn it, lost my walkie-talkie. Just bought them. They were 35-mile Motorola, and he was mad, and he was an older gentleman. So the next day, him and another guy went back the same way that we'd come in that mountain, looking for that walkie-talkie, hoping to maybe see it laying on the trail somewhere. Never found it. So we disregarded it at that point because, good luck. There's no way you're going to find a walkie-talkie that's, that blends into the ground. So it's a waste of time to think you're going to spend a whole lot of time on a camping trip just trying to find one walkie-talkie that costs $60. So we disregarded it at that point. Also, at that point, there was another gentleman there who had a bunch of photographs in his pocket. We did not know at the time that he had lost one of those photographs. Both of those items show up 4 days later in rock cairns outside of our campsite. A photograph and a walkie-talkie.
That's amazing. That seems to be happening a lot, actually. Like I've heard of other people, like, for example, I think it was Steve Istall losing a knife, and then it was brought back to him and didn't even know how it came back.
Well, we found some other interesting things that we haven't really talked about. Um, as far as right by our vehicle when we were heading back from an investigation area, we right along the path we travel, we'll find a bird's feather, like a good sized feather, probably about, I don't know, 12 inches long. And right on that trail, there was a little rock sitting on top of this feather right along our trail. We never seen it going in, but on our way out during the nighttime, we had it lit up with our headlamps, and I'm going, what the heck is this right in the middle of our trail?
Hmm.
Yeah,
I forgot about
we
that.
went in during the daylight, and then we came out at nighttime, and there's this feather with a rock on top of it, weighted down. So
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I mean, now certainly if you got a rock weighting it down, that changes the dynamic of any feather floating down from the sky.
yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting.
The other thing too, I don't know if you're a deer hunter or you're a hunter or anything like that, Randy.
I've never hunted.
Oh, okay. We've seen some weird things, or I have seen some weird things out in the woods, such as I'd come across a stump that was cut down probably 1 foot high, and around that stump we had sticks piled all the way around this stump, almost like making a teepee or something like that. And I'm standing there as I'm walking by, I'm scratching my head and I'm going, who the hell would waste their time and break all the sticks and all these, they almost look about the same size, took the time to snap all these sticks and pile them around this little stump here. The first thing I thought of was maybe somebody maybe putting a cache out or something like that with the, those GPS cachers and stuff like that. That's the first thing that came to mind, but there was nothing inside underneath these sticks or anything like that. So tree structures or whatever. What have you come across?
Well, I think not really coming across anything like that, but it falls back into what we've discovered with the holes being dug, and the fact that these young ones get their skill set in a series of steps, probably. That's why it seems like the juveniles are always the ones that we are the ones that we see. We're able to walk up on that little one trying to hide. They're undisciplined. They don't quite have the skill set that the adults have spent their lifetime honing. So how do they get that skill set without the training? So you're bound to find where they are breaking sticks, learning the patterns, doing the things that we know that they know as adults. But what do they look like when they don't quite know everything about it, but they're still trying? And they're still trying to emulate mom and dad's behaviors. So I'm certain you're going to find little small structures, small manipulations that they have done without any particular meaning behind them, but they are learning. That just makes sense to me.
Are they learning mind speak too at the same time? Or like, we haven't talked about mind speak yet. I know we haven't to talk about, but do you think that they're growing from a younger age and maybe learning the ability?
I've never had anything like that happen. I've been walking with somebody who dropped to his knee and was like, "Oh, I just got zapped," and I was completely floored with the acting job that a lot of people can do. So, and I'm not trying to disparage anybody. You may think they're mind speaking, but you're still only it's you talking to yourself in your own head, and you're scared, and you're like, I better get out of here. And then that changes to where it told me I needed to get out of here. Being a firefighter, I mean, you talk about traumatic experiences with life and death situations, with thought processes that you have to gain control of your mind and your emotions. Most people that I'm out with don't have that ability. They get themselves built up in a frightful situation, in a fearful situation, and they leave themselves on edge. A very, very anxiety-ridden. When you're walking around at night, you stay on edge, and every sound. I mean, people can create things that aren't there. They fill the gaps with things they don't understand, and That's the only thing that makes sense to me, because I've had such a close encounter with that large male and the little one. Never anything within my mind, but I was terrified, brought on by my own thought processes. I mean, I thought I was having a heart attack, and the fear, my fear was going through the roof. So I understand how, when you take things in, that's almost PTSD type stuff, where you know, it's a trauma scene. Your memory of it, if you have not trained yourself like I did in the fire service to control yourself and calm yourself down, take in the details, all those are going to be warped when you're trying to recall what happened. And that, I can't believe that as many times and as close as we've gotten to some of these things out on this property, that we've never had any of that stuff happen. That I've never seen the eyes glow on their own illumination. I've never seen orbs, never seen mind speak, never seen portals. So I can't believe that all you have to do is suggest something like that, and then the masses grab hold of it.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads into what we were speaking about before we went on to record. We were talking about how people might misperceive their disappearance, or the disappearing in front of them, or stuff like that, or if there's a portal. And you had the same type of thought when it come to people filling in the gaps. What are they seeing? Speed of movement.
Holy shit!
Brought up.
Beam me the fuck up, Scotty.
What can you say to that?
Well, I'm telling you, we talked about, Shane and I talked about this, and there was two other people that we talked about when we saw this happen. We were walking down a trail towards the mud flats, and I'm looking. It's midnight or later, completely dark, and I would scan with my thermal camera, and I have a thermal camera that's on top of my walking stick, so it allows me. We've been so lucky with this camera setup because I never really have to face where I'm looking. The camera is on top of my walking stick, so my monitor is at my chest. So I'm looking at my monitor, and the camera is panning the creek down along our side, and I see, and I think it's because I'm not. Most cameras, you have to be facing the way it's looking, which is a killer of activity. So my camera is lucky, and so I catch a head that's popping up out of the creek, but I'm not looking in its direction. My camera is, and I tell the guys, I said, I see one. It's at the creek. Look, popped his head up out of the creek. The two guys in the front stopped to come back so they could look at my monitor, and just the action of them stopping to come back in my direction, the head goes. I mean, it drops just like a second, just a blur. That's how fast it dropped. And so when they came back and we were looking at the monitor, you could still see the heat signature of where it had dropped down. You could still see the heat. And I said, watch right there. I said, watch, you're going to see a head slowly peek up. I said, keep your eye on that white spot right there in that deep grass. And sure enough, you see this head going very slowly. And I said, there it is. I said, there it is. And I said, so we watched it. And the difference, the way it behaves as when you face it, is day and night different of when you're not facing it. That tells me they think we can see in the dark the way they can see in the dark. Because when you're facing them, their movement is slow, like a human sniper. A sniper would move extremely slowly because they understand that we see movement. That is clear to us at this point because we filmed it 3 or 4 times, where when you're facing them, they will move very, very slowly. So they have an understanding from their point of view that we can see movement. So they move that way. But when we turn our heads and look in the other direction, that's when they move quickly. So that seems to be a pattern that people have reported for 100 years now. And now all of a sudden we've got the technology that's verifying it.
Mm-hmm. So do you walk much with your cameras over the shoulder in the daylight, like looking behind, like Scott Carpenter used to do?
Shane has got, I'm getting ready to put one out where he caught one coming up, following him and popping his head up over a ridge as he was filming behind him up, so I'm getting ready to drop a video about that.
That's cool.
And that's the same ridge where we marked the rocks and put up there. So that, yeah, that's going to be a really good one. But as a practice, generally we go out to specific places on this property and we look for signs. And Shane, especially, he's a really good tracker. So he look for compressions and signs and all of the manipulations that he's learned to pay attention to. But as far as, man, trying to catch them that way, you spend more time sitting at your laptop going through hours and hours and hours of video, trying to hope to find a blip of something, checking you out. I've done stuff like that, especially when it comes to audio, listening, for 12 hours of audio. Man, it gets monotonous. So we do get a little relaxed, and some things we let slide, and we move on to the next trickery that we're going to try. But yeah, I mean, there's some reason that's worked in the past, I believe. But man, it's a lot of effort for little payback.
The FLIR video I'm showing you right here, that's Shane, right? He actually laid eyes on it.
Yes.
So he lit it up with white light.
Yes.
Cool. What did he see? I'm really curious.
Well, when I put that video out, that was me telling my version of everything from where I was filming with my thermal camera. I had the biologist standing beside me, and everything that happened before that and after that, that was all my version. I'm getting ready to drop where Shane tells his version of walking out there, what he sees, what he observed, what the eye shine looked like, what it was doing. I'm telling you, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. I had a watered down version of what happened when he walked out there, and he will do a better job of telling you in the moment what happened. And I'm going to put that video out here pretty soon. But yeah, I mean, the teeth clacking, what the eyes look like, that close up with the flashlight shining right in its face, it's extraordinary. And there's behaviors that happened that night that I'm going to get into that starts to show the patterns that I was talking to you guys about earlier. That shows the patterns of strategy. I do believe that because they were separated and the mother and the other sibling was further back in the wood line, I think they were in the process of leapfrogging each other, following us down that trail. We've gone down that trail 1,000,000 times. They knew our pattern. So why were they separated? Why was the mother in a position to throw a rock at Shane when she got too close to the little one? Well, that's because that's the pattern that they tactically set up. How many reports do you have to hear where somebody sees one in the woods and then a branch breaks over here to your right and look over and then the other one disappears?
Yeah.
That means that happens probably almost 100% of the time someone has a sighting. So that means they're setting themselves up for that tactically. They do it. It's not by accident. So I think the way we caught that little one, they were leapfrogging each other, keeping themselves separated when we caught that little one, because they seem to always have one in the periphery that can be a distraction if needed to help the other.
That was another question I would sort of have down on the list there is obviously their eyesight and visual acuity at nighttime, but they're also seen during the daytime also. Now, that being said, there's so many, I don't know, I'll call them Chesterfield Bigfoot research people out there that will come up and tell you all these theories and everything, but they can't prove anything. They said, oh, they see an IR light, they can see your electronics, they could see in UV and everything like that, and there's no proof to it. The only thing you can do is like maybe look at some university papers, such as like I believe it was the University of Georgia did a visual acuity test on deer, and I think it was geared towards the hunting industry as far as like camouflage clothing and what have you. And they found that deer can see in the UV, and the one thing that sticks out big time for them is the color blue for some reason. So if you're going to be hunting deer, they'll see you very easily if you're wearing blue jeans or anything blue. So I'm starting to be curious here as far as what their visual acuity is during the daytime. Obviously, they'll have more photoreceptors because they seem to be more comfortable at nighttime, I believe. But they're also seen during the day.
Yeah, I mean, all of that makes sense, but the part of that that's hard is until one of their eyes are dissected, we just won't know. We can only guess. But I can tell you, I've got some OCD issues, so maybe that's why I'm so ate up with this, and that's why I put so much thought processes into patterns when we start to uncover patterns and things. So I try to remember everything that I've read and can follow, because I will apply that to the things that I do out there with me and Shane. But when it comes to cameras, everybody talks about the IR light, the battery, the electrical emissions that can be seen. Certainly birds can see electrical patterns and things like that. That's how they know how to go north, things like that. So that's a given. So whether they can do that or not, I don't know. But what, in my OCD mind, I go back to the Sierra Sound. You guys have probably heard the Sierra Sounds. You probably had the video, the CDs that you got to listen to back in the day of Ron Moorhead and Al Berry telling the stories of up there on their hunting area. Well, one part of their story was when they tried to put up camera traps, and he said that the camera traps never worked. They were always being destroyed, avoided, the same things that we say about our cameras today. But back then, in the late 60s and early 70s, they didn't have infrared. They didn't have back then, they were using string traps on regular push button cameras, which gave off nothing. So why did they have the same results from those cameras as we're having to these cameras today, and we don't connect the two? So it didn't have, to me, I don't even need to worry about whether it's the IR light or batteries, because I don't think that's what it is, or they wouldn't have had problems with their string triggered cameras back then.
Right.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I mean, yeah, it's not the same technology. You got a Polaroid out there in the woods,
right?
With a string across the path, and how did they know that was there if there's no IR?
So we need to gravitate towards their intelligence, and if I haven't over the years been able to uncover these patterns of tactics and the communications, my God, their intelligence is way up here. They probably have their eye on you. There's no way, if they're around, they do not have their eye on you in some way or fashion. Maybe that's the young ones' job. Maybe that's why we're always catching the young ones, because their job is to let mom and dad know what we're up to. And they're the only ones who can afford to spend 6 hours at a time, while mom and dad got things to do. So it's, to me, that it's starting to show patterns where they watch if you're in their area, and you do a camera. I'm thinking I'm going to have to hang a drape up over around the tree, get an oscillating saw, cut a hole and sink the camera back into the tree, but have this whole thing covered up while I'm doing it, so that when I disassemble everything, they don't see me working on the camera part. They just see a big blanket, and then they see me pull it down and walk away. So you can't allow them to observe what you're doing, or my God, they are going to avoid it like the plague.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're having a little bit of trouble with the audio there, Randy.
Oh, well, poo. I haven't changed anything.
Okay.
I haven't even touched it, so.
I know, it started up. It just happened when you were telling us.
Did it go completely out?
Yeah, it sounds like you're speaking into an old tin can.
Well, I don't know how to change it.
Okay. Maybe you might have to pop out and pop back in, maybe. It could be the internet connection, possibly.
Come back in?
Sure. Wow.
It's hot.
It's weird. We got some issues here. Sorry about that. We had the Northern Lights going off there big time. We could see them all the way down into southern Ontario.
Did you see him last night?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see him last night.
Let's hear you, Randy.
All right, I'm back.
That's
Oh,
good.
I can hear you clearly now.
Then it must be a timeout thing, where after about 30 minutes it'll time me out.
Well, it could be the Aurora Borealis too, because it's awfully strong. We've seen them all the way from southern Ontario. I don't know if you've been able to see it last night.
Yes, yeah.
You
Yeah,
did see it.
good.
Yeah, well, that's that seems to be screwing up the internet all over the place here, apparently. So
See,
that could be it.
if we could see it, if we could see those electromagnetic things through the air, then we'd know how to fix it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what you guys all seen from a skeptic's point of view. That was all swamp gas, by the way.
It was the aliens.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope you guys. I mean, I don't know how many interviews you guys have done. Probably a lot.
A few.
I'm hoping that even though I'm skeptical of all of the what you consider woo, I'm certainly skeptical because I look at it from my own point of view. So I hope nobody has signed off who because I've said that have said, well, you know, I can't believe this guy or whatever. If it ever happens to me, I will not hide it. I will tell you, oh my God, first time in my life, I got zapped, or I got I had thoughts put in my head that weren't my own. I will not, because I'm about telling the truth. I'll tell the truth, and nothing like that has ever happened. So I hope people can see, and my YouTube channel is called the Sensible Bigfoot Project for a reason.
Yeah.
We're trying to be sensible about this, not jumping any gaps of understanding that hasn't been presented to us.
Right.
Yeah, get back on trail cameras. We just finished putting out like 48 trail cameras with interlocking view up at a location there. We had absolutely no indication that they were even up there. They might not even been in the area at that particular time because we haven't seen a sign of deer. We didn't get any rocks thrown at us. We didn't hear any whoops. We didn't hear nothing. We didn't hear any sort of activity that would indicate that they were even in the area.
Well, the only thing though was that we had when we were done the cameras, we were just standing at the end of it, just drinking some water, having some trail mix. Right, I don't know, 30, 40, maybe 50 feet away, crack, 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 and as you turn your head, bang, a tree came down. So but there wasn't that much foliage there, so I didn't see anything standing there. So if there was something belly crawling or was down low, could push it over, that would be the only way. But I don't know how we wouldn't have seen anything unless they stayed completely still and we walked past them just about 5-10 minutes later. So
we were doing everything too. Even we heard on the radio about you guys indicating that you had a tree come down, so we tried doing a diversion tactic. Like we fired some shotgun rounds off in the distance there to see if that would draw them away or maybe draw their attention away. But I don't even think they were up there, to tell you the truth, because
yeah, they might not have been there.
Yeah. Which is another question that leads us in, or segues into another question there, is they can't stay in a particular spot 365 days a year, 7 days a week. They got to do a circuit or something. Like even if you hunt deer, for instance, you can sit on a stand and not see anything for 2 weeks, and then the one time that you give up, the biggest buck that you've been tracking for the longest time walks right underneath your stand. So
we're posed that question all the time. That seems to be one of the staple questions: is where do you think they live? Why can't we find where they live? What about caves? What about this? What about that? Well, I can tell you this. I mean, certainly I don't know, but if you're not paying attention to the patterns, you'll never know. But the patterns are telling us that they're opportunistic nappers. They'll nap out in the open, and they use a lot of nonverbal communications to alert one another what's going on for a reason. That's why we're hearing tree knocks. That's why we're hearing rock clacks. They've got a communication system set up where they tell the others, pay attention, we got somebody coming into our area. And I don't think they are dumb enough. Now, maybe in the beginning, I would have thought they were dumb enough, but clearly they're not, to allow themselves to be put into a position where they can get caught in a cave. For some reason, most people have very unrealistic expectations of what caves look like. They seem to think that all caves are what you'd see in a cartoon, where you can just waltz in and it's nice and roomy and everything is hunky-dory and you got plenty of light. You go 10 feet into a cave and it is murky, pitch dark. Not even the best eyesight is going to help you in that kind of darkness. That's why bats use sonar. And most caves are decrepit, tight crawl spaces through mud and tight squeezing places. Caves do not look like what you think they look like. These things are not going to be using caves. They are not going to allow themselves to be put into a position that they can be closed up in and caught in. And in that thought, people are like, oh, you don't know if caves aren't all connected and they've got a highway of caves underneath and they can come out somewhere else. Again, I think people have unrealistic expectations of what caves are. They seen that one time where one cave in the whole history of the world had an exit somewhere else. And for some reason, they have these ideas that caves are these highway systems underground. And that doesn't make any kind of sense to me.
I never liked that one either. So, oh, you're silent, Chris.
But see, I come across as a real butthole because I talk like that, and people are like, well, I don't like him because he thinks he knows it all.
Mr. Know-it-all, yeah.
Well, we don't agree with the Chesterfield Bigfoot research groups out there with all their theories and everything. They could, well, let's test these theories out. Show us the proof, and nobody can show the proof. It's all just theories, and that's about it. But and again, yeah, you're right on the caves there. If you look at it, we could barely even squeeze in ourselves in most caves. And I would never go in a cave because my luck will have an earthquake and something will give way. I'm stuck in there.
Yeah, me too. Or I'd go in there and I'd find a Bigfoot and kick my ass.
They can't even fit in most caves anyway, so. Which also, the teepee structures, for instance. Oh yeah, Bigfoot did that, but okay.
I want to say something about that.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, there's a friend of mine I got on Facebook that I used to hang out with years ago from school. She posted some photos up in Quebec, where she's from, of her family going out and stacking up trees, broken limbs around tree trunks, making teepees. I have no idea. I haven't talked to her, and I haven't asked her why they did that, if they've done it a lot or anything. But I just thought, well, look, people are out there putting up teepee structures as a thing to do. At least these friends of mine were. So it could be man-made, but that some of the photos. Let me go back to the photos. Some of the photos were the limbs used weren't gigantic limbs, and they weren't 30 feet long or 20 feet long. They were just in the around 6 foot range. So
one time I was up in the Kiamichis off the K Trail, and I'd actually wormed my way down into I was using the bathroom. I was going number 2. So I'm sitting there and I'm taking care of business, and I look over and I see something. So when I get done, I go over and I look at it, and I took a picture of it. It was about a 4 foot tall pine tree that was bent over and laying flat on the ground and had 2 rocks on top of the green part. And I thought that was the most interesting thing that I had ever seen. Now, here's my point. I don't make a big deal out of these things. It is interesting. But there is no way I can ever disregard the kind of signs that hunters put in areas where they want to point out tell my friend, just off that trail you'll see something, I'm hunting in that location, or I'm marking this area because I know where my tree stand is from this point. So that fact alone means that I can and should disregard most structures, because you don't know, you haven't seen it, and the ground in the forest is covered with 3-foot deep perma floor that's from stuff that is fallen out of the trees. So they fall out of the trees all the time. Trees fall over all the time. The forest floor is covered with them. Doesn't mean that the Bigfoots aren't doing some of this, or most of it, all of it, or some of it. I just can't trust myself to know the difference.
Right. One thing that we did talk about was, just wanted to go back to quick, like the speed in which they can move, and you were talking about how one would duck its head so fast, or maybe that's how people are confusing their ability to disappear.
Yeah, especially if I mean, even if you just turn your head and they think for 1 second you're even glancing, even though you may not be glancing, if you just turn your head but you're still looking at them, and they take that head movement as you looking somewhere else, they might do that movement to disappear.
Yeah.
And from your point of view, it is a complete disappearance.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, humans can cloak too, for that matter. You wear the right clothes, you wear the right clothing, even from the Army surplus store, for instance, you can blend into any environment. You could lean up against a tree and you'll disappear just like that.
Mm-hmm.
I got some photos here I'm going to put up right here, right now. So, well, that's good. Randy, I'm going to ask you there about travel corridors. What do you find with travel corridors? Like up around our neck of the woods, as far as Ontario goes, we found the major travel corridors for these things are obviously hydro line right-of-ways, railway lines, even the edges of dirt roads and 4x4 roads, like 2 tracks and what have you. What's your experience on that? What do you think?
You know, all of that makes perfect sense. I mean, a straight line between this chunk of woods is a power line. I would think, even though they don't have much issue pushing through any type of brush, is not much of an issue for them. It still seems to be that why wouldn't you take the path of least resistance? So that, from a logical sense, makes the most. But travel routes, I thought when you first posed the question, I thought you were going to talk about travel routes like in migration or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, what Shane has uncovered at the 400 is, for a while there, at the peak of what we had going on there a couple years back, there was a pattern of movement where they were 2 weeks gone and a week on this property. So we would try to time our trips there to that pattern, so we'd catch them there. And that held true for quite a while. So it seemed like they would retreat back to this 400 acres because of its relative safety net area. It's private. We had a lock gate to get in, and not very many people would ever meander into that location. And it's surrounded by rural and other thousands of acres of woods. So the patterns, we know on the property they're eating pawpaws. The pawpaws when they're in season. Shane was finding the pawpaw seeds in their scat, even up to a month or so past the last pawpaw being found on the ground, which again we find quite interesting. Where are they keeping pawpaws? How are they still eating pawpaws when they're all gone and none around, and they're still pooping out pawpaw seeds? It's almost indicates that they might have learned to dig a hole in the side of the hill, throw pawpaw fruits in there and cover it with a rock and create a cellar. Who knows? If we ever find something like that, it will be fantastic. But all we know is what the evidence is telling us, and they're clearly eating pawpaws way after the pawpaws are gone. So that's all we have to go on now. Now everything after that is just speculation until we find something else. But so it shows a pattern where I think, from all the stories that I've read about their behaviors, somebody caught one in a barn, elbow deep in the horse sweet feed. One saw one go into their chicken coop and come out with one chicken. I think they've learned, and most people, when you hear the patterns of when they put out baits, put out a whole pile of apples because they won't take them all. Don't put out 2 apples because they don't want you to know they've been there, so they won't take one of the 2 apples. But if you put out 20 apples, they'll take 2 of the 20 apples. So so with that in mind, if that's a pattern that repeats itself over and over again, they have learned to make a circuit in rural areas. They know there's a chicken coop over here with 100 chickens, and if once a week they come over there and they just take one chicken, the supply never depletes itself. If they bring the family and they wipe out that whole chicken coop, then the farmer will do something different. Right. So they clearly show the pattern where they make these loops, and they'll go to rabbit hutches and swipe a rabbit. They go to chicken coops and grab some eggs, and farmers' fields and horse feed, and they've learned all these places where they can get bits and pieces of their diet filled in these looping patterns that they travel. I'm not sure they need to migrate. I think they're smart enough, maybe up in the Pacific Northwest and maybe in Canada. I don't know anything about those situations, whether they specifically need to follow herds of animals. I think their diet is diverse enough where I think they may just have small travel routes of comfortable. It's comfortable for them. They specifically know where everything's at, where they can go. So that just makes the most sense to me until I get something different that tells me something different.
Yeah.
So you got to write a book on how you managed to pick up a $10,000 or $12,000 thermal drone without your wife killing you.
Oh man, yeah.
That's a documentary. That's a
yeah.
Which,
you guys be quiet. She still doesn't know.
Oh, no. Okay. It was only 2,000. All right, tell us about the drone there. We got to get into it. We're trying to get a drone. We had like a GoFundMe thing. We thought for sure, the Bigfoot community would put the money where the mouth is, and we have a spot.
But no.
If you want to donate. But yeah, it's been flatline. But anyways, tell us about what your thoughts are on the drones.
I always thought that, we have to chase technology. We have to. We'd be foolish not to. So I was looking at the drones, and I had never flown one before, so I don't know anything about them. So I own a siding company, and I'm a retired firefighter. So sometimes I take all these trips and I do all this stuff, and it's out of my own pocket. So yes, I have spent an exorbitant amount of money, ridiculous amounts. I'm sometimes embarrassed by how much money I've spent on this. But I was looking at drones and just thinking this has got to be the next tool, especially the thermal drone. And I couldn't have the $3,000 one or the $4,000 DJI. I had to go all the way up to the Autel Devo 2 Dual that was $10,000, $11,000 with a, and then I had to get the big monitor because I want to be able to do it in the daytime too. So I had to get the big $1,500 monitor that's super bright, and that's another couple thousand. So if you don't curtail yourself, you will allow yourself to spend ridiculous amounts. But I felt like it was important, and we haven't captured anything yet, but we also haven't had some of the incidents happen that we need for this to be effective. And that is, it needs to quickly be deployed, and it needs to be quick. So I need to start having this already set up in a landing area with no foliage above, so that when it gets dark, I know that I don't have foliage above it, and I can launch it quickly. So there's certain things that we need to have set up in place. And when we start having rocks thrown into our camp, that's the moment I think the drone will work best, when you have physical evidence that they're close, and when they're close, the drone should be able to find them. So we've used it up to this point in a lot of experimental ways where I'm trying to figure things out, and I've spotted other animals. We just filmed a bear, which confused me as I was watching it walking, because it was leaving its footprints. You could see its footprints. So it looked like I had filmed myself in my backyard with no shoes on to see if I could see heat thermal footprints, so I could see my own footprints. So that's what I was comparing it to when I was watching this bear from an altitude. To me, it appeared to be something bipedal leaving footprints that the heat was picking up. And so we were super excited about it, Come to find out, it was a bear. But but I'm just saying. So it's a tool that I think when it does happen, it's going to be spectacular. But we need them to be close enough to be throwing rocks before we'll catch them.
Right.
Which leads another question to, I guess, the optimal time to deploy a drone, if you want the best footage, let's say, is do it early spring and into the fall, for instance, like
Right.
when there's no foliage on the tree. And I
Yeah.
wish we had you up there when we were doing our camera trap deploy, because I was buzzing the area in like a grid pattern at treetop level, trying to capture anything. Early spring, no leaves on the trees. My camera's pointing down, trying to catch something, spying on these guys putting up tree cameras or camera traps. Couldn't find a thing. So that might be a good thing, but it would have been nice to have your thermal drone up there.
Yeah. I mean, and what's great about this Autel is one of the camera views that I use during the day, which I find is starting to be very a nice tactic, is you can have a regular 4K video and it goes up to 8K. So there's a very detailed video, daytime video. So I can go up to my daytime video and I can overlay in the center of that just a small square of a thermal view, so that in the daytime I can be looking around looking for heat signatures while it's taking a regular daytime 4K video of the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
So using the two in conjunction with each other seems to be a fantastic way. But then again, we don't use them too much during the day, but we should start doing that.
Yeah. Now getting into the tech that we're using, you use FLIR. Now you have some sort of contraption. You have it mounted on a stick. You almost look like Moses walking through the woods there with your.
I do. I feel a lot like Moses, leading the people from Egypt.
Yes.
But yes, actually, when I was in the market, 10, 12, 15 years ago, looking for a thermal, I was uninterested in the ones where you put it up to your eye and had to face them. I mean, I already learned the patterns at that point that you got to find ways to not be facing them. So I looked and I eventually found a thermal that was made for Cadillacs, high-end Cadillacs.
Yeah.
So when I started looking at it, I was like, well, that's good because it's already set up for 12 volt. And it was made to set on the front grill, and it has a 20-foot cord that runs to the monitor that's in the dash of the car. And there's a little DVR that goes with it that you put in the glove compartment so you can record. So it's also made for like buses and other vehicles that need to record and stuff like that. And I'm like, that is perfect. That's exactly that's already set up the way I would need. So I bought the DVR and the monitor and the camera, and then just a little ATV battery that I put into a fanny pack that's 12 volt. And so it's already set up. And the fact that you can separate the little tiny camera 20 foot away from where you're looking at the monitor, that's the key to this thermal being better than what I've seen in any other thermal, in the fact that it can be on top of a walking stick, and I can expand that walking stick up to about 10 foot to look over brush, look over briar patches. It's amazing. More people should have them like that.
It's a great idea.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Now you also have your audio recorders, which I think is an excellent idea, is sticking them in PVC and then camouflaging with bark in a sense.
Yes. That has been our go-to data collection, has just been able to lay those logs out and hear things that are happening, in real time. It's really been amazing. I used to put them out in a little black box and cover them with rocks and stuff like that. And one time we had something come up and disassemble the rocks and tap on the recorder. So I'm pretty sure they were onto us. So when we started turning them into real logs that look like logs, man, you cannot see these things laying on the forest floor, and so that has really worked out well for us.
Wow.
Well, that's a great idea too. That's sort of like our camouflage tree bark, and that's
Yeah.
camouflaging our camera traps too. Once you paint these things up and you staple them up against a tree, you cannot even see them even from like 10 or 15 feet away. It just blends in quite nicely. So
Yeah, you sent me that picture. That looks really good.
fingers crossed that 7 months from now we'll pull something out. So
Yeah,
we'll
they blend
definitely
in.
share that.
They blend in so well. Like we were ahead of Chris. Me and two other guys were ahead of Chris one day. We went out to a conservation area just to see how long it would take to set them up, what ladders we were going to use and stuff like that. Well, Chris comes down the path behind us and he goes, well, where the hell did you put it? Where'd you put the camera?
So
It's right there.
good.
It's right there in front of you. You couldn't see it. That's how well they blend in. So hopefully we're lucky.
Yeah, and we all have a need. I actually like the chase. I mean, it's not really a chase. I like trying to outthink them. I like trying to trick them, and that's going to trigger a lot of people responding to this by, oh, you can't trick them. They can sense when you're trying to be deceitful and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I mean, I enjoy the process, and that's my OCD. I need something to occupy my thoughts. If not, I would be worrying myself sick all night long, couldn't get to sleep just thinking about this. Allows me to fill my mind up with the thing that I enjoy thinking about. And I think we all enjoy that process of trying to trick them.
Right. Yeah.
Hold my beer. Yeah, we're all dreaming up of what's the next little bit of subterfuge we can dream up next. There's got to be something, even something. Well, let's take a soda can for instance. If you can mount some sort of camera inside a soda can, just laying around your camp, making it look like you're a slob camper or something like that, or garbage perhaps, or I have no idea what else. What would work good on that's sitting on a picnic bench or something around your campsite? Pack of bacon.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I put out a video where we did have a recording of one going through every box on our table, and I wouldn't have known it if I didn't have OCD. We come back, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning after hiking all night long. We come back to camp, and I have my table set up in a certain L pattern under a canopy where I've got my cooking supplies, my water jug, all of my tableware and all this stuff. And then the other table has some tech on it with a duffel bag and some other stuff. And I'm looking at the table, and I didn't realize how ingrained my OCD was. Where everything has to be in its place. I know where everything's at. When I'm making my coffee, I know exactly where to pull the spoon out of the box because they're all sitting right where I need everything. Everything's perfect. That's how an OCD person thinks. Well, we come back to the table and it's 3 a.m. and I'm looking at the table and I tell Shane, I said, something's been here. He goes, how do you know? I said, because my plastic silverware box that I always pull my silverware out of is laying on its side. It's never been that way. Never. Something's been on this table enough to either knock that over or lay it down. And then behind it was a box full of food, and the food wasn't touched. So of course we get excited because we're like, there's no way a raccoon would get up there and just knock that over and not explore that food box.
Yeah.
So with just that one item moved, I left a recorder sitting on the end of the table. Next time we're out, and this is the night that preceded us walking up on that little one out in the off the trail. What we didn't know is when we were coming back down to the campsite at 2 a.m., there was something at our table at that moment. We didn't know it until I listened to the recorder the next day. And it runs from our campsite as we're coming. You can hear our Polaris coming down the hill. So as we're coming into camp, it vacates. And then 30 minutes later, we catch the little one out there with the mom. So it was them in our campsite. So the thing is, when we came back to camp that time, even though I had a recorder out, I still start by looking at the table to see if there's anything that sticks out. And yes, there was. I said the wet naps that were on top of the orange 5-gallon water jug that's at the end of the table, that L-shaped table. I said at the very end was a 5-gallon orange water jug that always had the wet naps on top of that water jug. And the wet naps were sitting on the table. And I said, something's been here. And he goes, what is it this time? I said, those wet naps have never sat on the table. They've always on top of the water jug. I clean my hands with it, and and it's right there. I said, something put that down on the table. So we hastily the next day, after having that nighttime encounter with the little one off the trail, I'm listening to the recorder, and lo and behold, you hear something come up, mess with the recorder. Then there was a duffel bag on the table, or a backpack on the table right next to the recorder. You hear zipper go 17 times, go zip, 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 zip. And then it moves to whatever was next, which was a box of supplies. And then it gets to a box that had my cooking supplies in it. And you can hear a pan clank. And I told Shane, I said, that's the cooking box. I said, it's systematically moving down the table. You heard the zipper, then it's moved to the next one. It's looking through that box. You hear the pans clank together. I said, that's the cooking box. And then it went down, and then you hear the rustle of the wet nap thing that was on the table. And we looked at that wet nap thing, and there was a wet nap pulled about 3/4 of the way out with dirty smudge marks on it.
Nice. It's almost like on your, cool? That is cool. I've always, how do you do it? How do you get somebody to sit in, say, the back of your van or whatever while you guys go out, and just sit in there with maybe some recorders and ready to go, with just as long as they don't show themselves? Maybe they can be tricked that way as well. But who's going to want to sit in a vehicle for hours on end?
Right. Yeah, and then have a night not happen. People don't do it for more than once, because when the first night turns up dry, they're like, okay, I ain't doing that again. But hey, if y'all's GoFundMe for your drone doesn't quite give you enough for a drone, but it gives you enough for something else, say, okay, now we're going to just bring Randy up here, and we're all going to research for a couple of weeks.
Okay, that's great. That might work.
We might have to do that.
Fly you up. The problem is, with this country, you might not be able to leave. That's the problem.
I may not want to.
Yeah, sure.
That goes both ways, man.
You got an election coming up. You might want to get the hell out of Dodge over there.
Right.
You still have to get the Transport Canada certification there, much like you probably need it down in the States too, right? You're 107, I think.
I don't know.
Oops.
I thought I'd only need a passport.
Well, I meant for flying your drone up here in Canada.
Oh. Is it regulated like that?
Up here, if you're over if it's not considered a micro drone, like it has to be under a certain weight limit.
Oh,
I guess.
I don't know. Sure. I don't know any of that. I'm not. I'm not a certified pilot or anything.
Oh, so
I'm just a hobbyist.
You're an outlaw. The FAA is going to come after you now.
Maybe. I mean, I'm not harassing anybody. I'm not flying in places I'm not supposed to fly. So, I did inquire when we went to a national park, and I asked, and they said you can't. So I didn't. So as far as following things like that, I'll follow those rules.
Oh, gotcha. Right. The new tech you think of getting into as far as trickery, I guess?
Well, I was looking into cameras, and one that I think has promise. It's a camera made for your front door to take videos and pictures through your peephole. So the camera is on the inside of your front door, and there's a 2-inch long thing looking through your peephole, and it takes a picture of your whole front stoop. Yeah. And it's triggered by a very small, about the size of a 50-cent piece, little infrared. It's a little trigger that triggers the camera that you say out by your sidewalk. So when somebody walks up, it triggers the camera, and it'll take 6 pictures. But all you see at the door is a tiny little round camera lens. I actually put a log together, cut it in half, put hinges on it, hollowed it out, drilled a hole about the thickness of a door, set that camera up inside a log, and put it out, and then set that little trigger thing up in a tree looking straight down on one of the pawpaw trees. and had the log sitting somewhere else watching that tree. So, but the camera got wet. Water got into the log and it got wet. So it's designed to be on the inside of your house, on the inside of your door. So it is not weatherproof at all. So now I've got a destroyed camera, and that was my third camera, and they're like $200 a piece. So I kept testing them out, and they kept getting wet. And then when I had one that I thought was going to work, took it out there and set it up, and it got wet. So I got to keep throwing money at this because I think it's a great idea. But I've got to get another one, and I think I've got a better idea of how to keep it completely dry. Yeah. So I don't need to go into that, but I do think I do have it figured out how I can keep it completely dry, even within the confinements of a closed up log. But a camera that is not triggered by the camera itself, but by a separate that can be 30 feet away, that and the way that camera is just a teeny tiny lens in the side of a log might be the key to a good setup.
That does sound good.
Yeah, you're gonna have to share that with us after you get that figured out. Could be something as simple as using silicone caulk or something like that, just to coat everything up.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of the sensor away from the camera itself. That's great. But are you going to run a string?
Who knows? Who knows?
Well, you run like string traps, like black piece of thread across certain areas, and see what the direction to travel is.
Oh yeah. Shane does that all the time. Lots of string. You use that to monitor traffic. Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Like looking at some of your footage there, like the is it the Ridge Runner video?
Yeah, the Ridge Walker.
Yeah, the Ridge Walker. I'm blown away by it. I thought that was a great catch. Now, everybody says how intelligent they are and everything, but yet they skylighted themselves along a ridge line. You guys caught them, so they obviously.
Well, there was 2 or 3 components with that late afternoon where that happened. The camera was behind the tents facing that way because my partner had seen shadowy movement off to the east on top of that ridge. He was telling me to learn how to look through your peripheral vision. He said, I'm seeing movement over there. He was an older researcher that I teamed up with at the time because I was trying to learn things. So he was saying, so over there, I'm seeing movements in the shadows. He said, so he set this camera up facing across the logging road, and it ran for like 7 hours until after dark. We didn't even know that we captured anything. Our activity was further down the hill on the other side of the parked vehicles and the other side of the tents, facing down into a holler. I was doing tree knocks way down there. So this thing came up behind us with the sunlight behind it, which is all to its benefit. And we just had a camera sitting there for 7 hours filming, and when we caught it, and it came in between 2 of my tree knocks, checked this out, and then moved on. But so there were circumstances that you can now put in your library that it was downwind from us. The light was working to its benefit to where it could see because it was behind him shining in our direction. So yeah. And he was being very stealthy. He had no idea the camera had been running for 7 hours. So it was just one of those things. We got lucky. And then when I had MK Davis take the film and take some clips of it and figure it out, the figure was completely reddish brown from head to toe. So I know it's a Bigfoot, especially after MK's breaking it down and sending us back the small clip. But it's insignificant. It's just a stick figure. It was far enough away where it's just something moving, but we know what it was.
Yeah, I'm watching it right now. Yeah, that's really neat.
Which leads us to another question there. On cameras, Daryl and myself both filmed Eye Shine. We knew it was a Bigfoot. We know now for sure it was a Bigfoot just because we used surveying equipment, for instance, to measure the eye height from our field of view. And we know it was like 9'1". And the one that Daryl shot would have had to been at the very least 8 feet
Yeah.
tall, anyways, with the level of the height of the eye shine. And we were using an ordinary camera, and we were facing right towards them. Um, Very inexpensive digital night vision camera, and it had a IR flood lamp in a sense, and we were able to capture it. Not the whole body, but we could catch them from behind foliage. We were able to see the eye shine, the eye reflection of the light. They didn't seem to be too spooked about it, but they didn't. There's multiple Bigfoot in that area, especially in the one that Daryl captured.
That's the Madoc location for.
Yeah, they didn't seem to be too, too bashful as far as being filmed. So,
Well, they were behind the trees. They didn't run off.
no,
And like you said, when it came to, you took a shot of me with the thermal and put me down there, and that's when I realized that the eye shine was well above my head.
So,
There was
what's your
a
thoughts?
garden.
Again, we're going to touch on that too, as far as IR flood lamps. There, like just using like the small little red IR lights there. Do you think that bothers them? Like, what's your experience with those things?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what bothers them or not. I do know that in the beginnings, I remember way back in the day when I was going with the night vision, I bought a Gen 2 or a Gen 3, whichever ones were the better gens at the time. And back then it was like almost $3,000, and it was for a scope. And that was when I first started saying, okay, no matter what technology is out there, I'm just going to keep buying the best of what there is. But it didn't take me long for the night vision for me to find out that I can't see past the foliage with it. So no matter how much you light it up with an IR light, you still can only see to the edge of the foliage. So that's why I gravitated towards thermal after that. But I don't know how that affects them. Sometimes it seems like it may not, but then it's just me guessing. There is a behavior that I saw with that little one as Shane was walking out there. And let's go back to me having OCD and me being able to see a pattern of behavior, because I think I can tell what it was thinking when its head was popping up, when all of a sudden Shane was walking out towards it. I could see it was trying to be very stealthy up to that point, moving slowly and all of these things and peeking. But then as soon as Shane starts walking out there, it goes like, oh crap, he's heading right towards me. That's what the behavior said to me, is what he was thinking. Here he comes. He's coming right at me. What am I going to do? Oh my God, he's coming closer. And I could see in the behaviors of that juvenile that he had to make a conscious decision at some point, as Shane was clearly heading in his direction, didn't know what to do. So he had to make a decision at that point. Do I bolt and run and get seen, or do I lay face down and hope he walks on by? And it chose the latter.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that speaks volumes, that they make a conscious decision as which has the less risk. Getting up and running, he's going to know I'm here. But if I lay here, how many times have we walked close to him hiding in deep brush, and they just stay quiet and motionless, and we walk? So clearly that is in their toolbox of what we do. So he had to make a decision that I think that's my lesser risk, is to just lay down and keep my head down and hope he walks on by.
Yeah.
True. And plus, you were saying that Shane lit him up with white light. I know they don't like white light.
Yeah, it was a flashlight. It was a regular flashlight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to withhold what Shane said, because I'm getting ready to post a video, and I might even post it in the next day or two, where he tells exactly, and this is the next day. He's saying this the next day, so it's fresh in his mind. He talks about walking up on it, what he sees, everything that happened, and it's spectacular.
Well,
Sounds
we'll
great.
definitely catch you. We subscribe to you, so
Well, man, I appreciate that. I truly do.
well, we encourage everybody else to subscribe to you guys too.
Absolutely.
That's the thing too. A lot of people seem to think they just walk on 2 feet and get around. Yeah, that might be the case, but yeah, they're out down on all fours too.
When I saw that big one down in Oklahoma in 2006, when I first saw him and the little one come out of the wood line, and they were moving at a pretty good clip to get to the back corner of my truck, he was stooped over with his arms swinging. That's why I had the opinion that they were like an ape, because he looked apish, and he was leaned over, and his hands were probably about 1.5 feet off the ground. But what I've learned since then, he was prepared that if someone was in the tent or started to come out of the tent, he was already low to the ground, and he could go ahead and just hit his hands and scoot on out of the picture with using the truck as a block, as block from where the tent was. He didn't know I was in the truck watching him. So they were positioning themselves to put the truck between them and the tent, but he was already low to the ground, which tells me that going ahead and going on down to your hands, he was just one step away from being at that point already.
Interesting. Well, that's the thing. My very first sighting goes back to '97 when I seen this thing walking on all fours. I thought it was a bear at first, and then when it got up and started walking off, it looked like an old man had a bad back, like a sore back, and he's hunched over, and his knees were bent and everything too. I said he almost looked better on all fours. He moved better on all fours rather than walking upright with the bent knees. It was a side profile, so just let people know.
I never got to see the big one walking in an upright position, but when he got to the back corner of my truck, he stood up as straight backboned as you and I did. I mean, there are details that I saw within those couple of minutes that he was doing back there, looking over the ladder racks into the campsite and all that stuff, but he was just as straight backboned as you and I. But walking up, he was all stooped over with his hands, with his arms swinging, like he was ready to go in gorilla mode. That's on my YouTube. It's called My Chickasaw Park Encounter.
And when you're going to come up to Ontario, bring a drone up.
Man, of course I need to get my passport situation straightened out, but I was invited up to Harrison Lake a few years back, and I was never able to make it. I actually went all the way up to Baker Mountain, which is right there at the border, and I didn't have my passport with me. I even called my wife and I was like, how can we get that passport sent to me? Because somebody invited me to go across the border up by Harrison Lake, but I was unable to do it at that time. But it is a dream of mine to get up there in Canada sometime, get it off my bucket list. Maybe you guys be the one to help me get me up there.
Yeah, well, we got a couple of places to look for sure.
We got a couple of spots, plenty of activity. So.
That'd be awesome.
Oh yeah, a few different places, both 4 hours apart from each other.
Yeah,
we got lots of driving up here, so much like you.
What's Ontario, the size of Texas or something like that, or bigger? So.
1.5 times the size of Texas. So
it's a bit bigger.
It's almost 2 days to drive across it.
Yeah.
And if you have a gun, you'd probably want to shoot yourself by the time you get to. I don't want to do it again. But yeah, we got tons of forests out here, and if you wanted to get lost, you'd certainly get lost up there. Now, what's the terrain like down your way? Is it more fragmented forest, and you got like ridge tops, mountains, and
well, the area down in Oklahoma that and all the way up into southern Missouri, it's Ozark. It's an Ozark mountain area where deep hollers and high ridges. Certainly, the mountains here in the Midwest would be nothing but foothills to the bigger mountains out on the West Coast. But for us here in the flatlands, it's mountains to us. But there's at least 1 million acres down there in southeast Oklahoma, called the Kiamichi Mountains or Kiamichi. So that's where I had that's where I got the Ridgewalker video and play. So there's plenty of terrain, and plenty of places that that work for what these critters need.
I don't know. I think we just about covered everything. So
just about to say, is there anything else?
I appreciate you guys. You've been very sensible host, and I certainly appreciate that. And yeah, it was a good time.
Well, thank you for listening, everybody. This has been Hastings County Sasquatch, Chris and Daryl, and we've been talking with Randy Harrington of the Sensible Bigfoot Project. Randy, thanks for coming on. And On YouTube, yes. Please visit his page on YouTube, like and subscribe, and don't forget us as well. We could use a couple likes and a couple subscribes on our page.
We'll put the
Thanks for
links
coming
down
on, Randy.
below.
Yeah, we'll put the links down below. And Randy,
Well,
thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Daryl and Chris. I appreciate you time you've given me today. You guys have been very sensible, and you know I like sensible, so thank you.
Well, you can come on up here and hang out with us, but don't forget your drone.
So I'll send my drone. Maybe I'll come with it.
Yeah, come on up. We'll show you. We'll show you around.